How are you? Good morning.
Top of the morning, laddie.
All right, everybody, we are back. This is Creativity is the Cure. Today I have one of my favorite creators on the planet. He's a drummer, photographer, artist, and writer, Mr. Dony Wynn. How are you doing today, Donnie?
Guilty as charged.
And do I have it correct? You are in Algood, Tennessee?
That is correct.
All right, I'm just going to give our listeners a little overview. Dony was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and raised in South Louisiana. Wynn began playing drums at age 3 and turned pro at age 13 with a fake mustache. He spent decades playing with people such as Dr. John, Patti LaBelle, Robert Plant, and most notably, Robert Palmer for 25 years. Would you like to explain the fake mustache?
Well, I had braces and I was underage. They have a thing in Louisiana called the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, the ABC board. And it was well known that I was underage, playing with older musicians. And there were some bands who were competing bands that they weren't real crazy that we were taking their jobs.
Uh-oh.
So they were notoriously sending out the ABC board to check on me. And so I decided to stop telling people who I was playing with. And then just as a matter of helping myself, these girls who really liked me, they bought me a fake mustache and I wore it.
You had supporters.
I even wore it. I even wore it past the time. I'll never forget. I was playing this college. It was a frat party.
Yeah.
And I decided to wear it this one night. I thought college girls were kind of sexy, so I was wearing it, thinking it would help me in the long run since I couldn't talk or smile because of my braces. But I had these two girls that were standing in front of me, and they were like, well, I could tell I had their attention. And I was, slinging it out there, doing my thing. And all of a sudden, half of the thing fell off.
Oh, no.
No, it was not good. Needless to say, I did not do very well with those two young ladies for the rest of the night. No.
How did it stay on?
That was the last. There was this glue, special glue that you would put it on with.
Yeah.
But that was the last time I tried to wear it. I was done at that point.
Brilliant disguise. Before we get deep into your career, I want to go back in time, and I would like to know, what is your first creative memory?
It was first grade, and there was a sport that was highly popular at the time called tetherball. Everyone would stand in line, and you would play whoever was the winner. The winner stayed in.
Right.
And they would take on the next player in line. And there was a fella by the name of Tommy. And Tommy, he wore all white. He had white jeans. He had white tennis shoes on. I mean, he was a sharp cat.
Yeah.
And a good-looking fella. And I noticed that when he played tetherball, and he owned the courts. I mean, at recess, no one could beat him. And I noticed all around the perimeter, and it was a huge crowd that gathered and watched every day at recess. And the good-looking girls were all watching him. And I'm putting two and two together, and I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden, this creative, I call them the invisible hands, or some people call them guardian angels. I mean,
yeah,
the mysterious unseen forces. I mean, they have a variety of names. But they've only talked to me at very specific times in my life. Now, I don't hear them speak. It's like telepathy.
Okay.
You get very clear signals of what they are asking you to do.
Right.
And they came on and said, you need to learn how to play tetherball well. And I had studied Tommy for a little while, and I knew some of his patented moves and stuff. And so I asked my dad if he would build me a tetherball pole in the backyard. And he got a tire, put concrete in the middle of it, and stuck a pole in it. And I started, working out, trying to learn moves and stuff that I could do. And one day I got in line to play Tommy, got my ass handed to me, Next couple of days, I got my ass handed to me. But then one day, I beat him.
Wow.
And everyone went nuts on the playground because no one had ever beat Tommy. He was unbeatable.
Right.
But I beat him, and people went nuts. And and then our recess games became monumental. I mean, huge crowds were gathering around the pit
Wow.
and watched our matches,
Right.
which were legendary. We some days he would beat me, other days I would beat him, but they were always great matches.
Right.
And but then I got to the point where I could beat him pretty regularly, and that felt good to me. And I'll never forget one day I had beat him, and then the recess bell rang, and I had this little army knapsack that I carried my books in, and I was tying my shoes, sitting on the ground, putting on the knapsack. And there was this really, really cute girl named Donna. She was a gypsy,
Wow.
real dark olive skin, brown hair, a mane of brown hair,
Right.
brownish black hair. And she had these, she wore the same clothes a lot. So I knew she came from a poor family. But she had these white flats like Amy Winehouse used to wear, those flat shoes that she had.
Yeah.
Uh, but they were patent leather and they had a point. They were pointy toed ones.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, I saw Donna, she was twirling hair around her finger and looking at me. And I'm tying my shoes, looking at her like, okay, what's going to happen here? And I got finished tying my shoes. I stood up, and all of a sudden she comes running towards me. And I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen? And she reared back and kicked the living shit out of me
Oh no.
in my shin. Yeah. And I hit the ground bleeding. She actually cut the skin. I was bleeding, howling like a monkey. And she goes running off. And I'm just like, what in the hell was that all about? And she ran off a little ways and she turned around and she blew me a kiss.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay, the mystery just deepened. And it never got any better between me and women. I still don't understand them at all beyond what happened that day. But that was the first time where the invisible hands, the guardian angels, talked to me about doing something that was sports, I guess you could say, whether that's creative or not. I
Yeah.
thought it was.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that they contacted me. And then once I understood that if I listened to them and did what they asked,
Right.
success would generally follow.
Yeah.
And that's proven to be my entire life has been spent when the invisible hands talk to me, I listen. And not only do I listen, but I do. I put it into play. And more times than not, they're going to ask you to do something that flies in the face of convention
Right.
completely. It's exact opposite of what society says to do.
Right.
But every time I've done it and done what they've asked, and usually it requires great struggle.
Yes.
It doesn't come easy. But after I have struggled for years at a time, the results that I gather from them have been magnanimous. I mean, huge. So I've learned to listen to them over the time. And you know, for instance, here's another time. My father was a very successful businessman. He had car dealerships, insurance companies, real estate companies. I mean, Avis Rent a Cars. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. My dad was a smart businessman,
Okay.
and I had already played with Dr. John,
Wow.
but
How old were you?
I think I was a junior in high school.
That's amazing.
And I ended up playing with him for a summer. I went on tour with him for a summer, and it was a very interesting time. I had a great time doing it. But at any rate, my father, when I got back, my dad said, "Listen, I want to let you know." And I'd also just been fired. I went to do a session with a bunch of real famous New Orleans guys,
Okay.
and I was known as the hot shot around Louisiana.
Right.
So they hired me, you know. they wanted to get some of my shit on their shit. I went down there to do it, and I had never ever done a session before. I'd only played live, and I found out I had terrible time. I
Yeah.
had great chops. I had chops for days, but I had terrible time, and I got fired. And it was just a horrible, horrible, horrible day. But it also was the greatest, greatest day
Right.
because to nurse my wounds, went to this little tape op room down the way, down the hall, and there was a Barbara Mandrell record that was playing that they had just cut at this place called Studio in the Country in Bogalusa. And I was about to leave because I wasn't into Barbara Mandrell music,
Right.
but all of a sudden this song came on, and the groove was a mile wide, and then I realized, oh, that's what those older guys were talking about. I needed to have a pocket. I didn't have a pocket. And that's when I found out I didn't have good time
Right.
because I couldn't play with a click.
Yeah.
But again, it was my very first session. I mean, this is all like, it
Right.
came at me high and hard.
Yeah.
This was not prepared for it. But at any rate, I asked them who the drummer was, and they said Larry London.
Oh, he's a great
And,
drummer.
and I had never heard of him at that time.
Yeah.
Now, he eventually became a mentor to me.
Wow. That's amazing.
But yeah, so I went home and got in my bedroom, and for the next year I didn't play with anybody. I stopped playing with everybody, and I just went and bought records
Right.
by people who I liked, the drummers,
Yes.
whether it was Bernard Purdy or whether it was Zigaboo. There was a number. My Bible became Little Feat's last record album, Richie Hayward.
Yes.
That became my Bible, and I'd learned to play those records lick for lick. I mean, I learned to play exactly what those guys did, so I understood why it made the singer do this, made the guitar player do that, how it set the next verse up. It just taught me everything about playing really well.
So your school, you're going to school.
And, absolutely. But at that time, my dad knew that I had been fired, and he goes, "Listen, I've been thinking about this, and so this is a good as time as any to tell you. But if you want, we'll bring you into the fold, and I'll have you serve at different capacities at all the different businesses so you can learn a little bit about all of it. And if you find that you like it, as I do, by the time you're 28, it'll all be yours,
Yeah.
all of
Wow.
it."
Incredible.
And so the next session I did, I tried it, and it wasn't going well. I just did not have, it didn't burn in my blood like it did his,
Right.
but music did. And so one day I went by a little studio there in town. It's called the Sound Doctor, and they had just recorded. Leo Nocentelli was coming up from New Orleans and was cutting tracks there. And the owner of the studio was a decent drummer. He wasn't very good, but he was okay. And Leo just used him. This was before drum machines or any of that.
Right. About what year would you
And
say?
76,
Okay.
77.
Okay.
And so at any rate, I asked the guy, I was like, "Man," I said, "I've been learning like for a year, and I'm hearing all sorts of stuff on these songs. I said, would you mind if I basically replaced all your parts and put stuff on it?" And of course, he could have said no, but he said yes.
Amazing.
And so I recut everything. And I remember Leo came over to the dealership where I was working, and he just said, "I don't know what you're doing here, but you really need to pursue music. You have a gift. You did some really cool stuff on my songs, and I appreciate it. So I think you should pursue music. I really do." And so, yeah. And then all of a sudden, the invisible hand started talking to me,
Right.
saying, "You know one person in LA. You don't know anybody in New York. Nashville's out of the question because it just wasn't my kind of music."
Right.
So I knew one person in LA, nobody in New York. Well, okay, LA. Now, luckily, the guy I knew in LA ended up being the lead singer for Toto.
Whoa.
So I was introduced to Jeff Porcaro my first day there, and he took a shine to me.
Another great
And
drummer.
he was getting me auditions. I auditioned for Larry Carlton, auditioned for Rufus, Boz Scaggs, and failed every one of them, every one. And then it was 2 weeks. My dad and I had made a deal for a year,
Okay.
and we were 2 weeks before the year was up. And I was like, yeah, the dream's over. I came out here. At least I gave it a shot.
Yeah, right.
I did what the invisible hand said to do, and I can at least go back home knowing that I gave it a shot. 2 weeks before I was due to go back, there was this good friend of mine who I grew up with. She became a big, big, big madam there in New Orleans. She had her own squadron of girls working for her. She ran her own business, and she knew that I was unsuccessful in my bid to get something going on. And so she goes, listen, I got a plane ticket for you. Get on the plane, come down here, stay at my crib in the quarter, and just have a blowout for the weekend. We'll have a good time, and then you can go back home and pack and go work for your dad. But let's just have a good time for a weekend. Sounds great to me. So I flew back, and the girls, they came. Of course, this was before 911, so they had a limousine came on the tarmac right to the back of the plane, and I ended up going out of the back and got in the car, and they had champagne, they had joints, they had a thing of blotter acid. I think they had a few Quaaludes, and uh, and then they had a ticket to go see Robert Palmer that night.
Ah,
And I had become a huge fan of his
yeah.
because he worked with Little Feat, of course, on Pressure Drop,
Yeah.
his second record.
Yes.
So I became a huge fan of his. I mean, like big. I always said if there's anyone in the world that I would want to work with, who would it be?
Oh, that.
Always. 100% him. That's
Wow.
who I wanted to work with.
From the beginning. Wow. Okay.
Absolutely. So that night I went to go see the show. It was fantastic. I'd seen him a couple of times prior, and he always had he knew how to work a band. He knew how to build a show. He sang his ass off.
Who's drummer?
Oh, that particular night was Joe Galdo, who is a guy from Miami. And anyway, the meters opened for Robert that night.
Wow, what a show.
So it was a good one. So after the show, Leo comes over and he goes, "Hey man, Robert's coming over to the crib looking for songs for this new record he's about ready to do, which was going to be Secrets." And he goes, "Why don't you come over?" He goes, "Because I'm going to play him some of that stuff that you did. So yeah, come on over." Sounds good. So I went over, and Robert showed up. We were the only two white people there. This is over in the Ninth Ward. And Zigaboo was there. I had become friends with them by that time. I was big fans of theirs. And first song played, and Robert looks at Zig. He goes, "Hey man, that's a really good drum track." Zig said, "Ain't me." Second song played again. Zig, that's a great drum track. Ain't me. Third song, he goes, "That's got to be you." And Zig says, "It's not me." And he says, "Well, who is it?" And Zig pointed at me. He goes, "It's Dony Wynn." And he looked over at me and he just kind of laughed. He goes, "But you're white." I said, "That's correct. I am. That's very astute of you, sir." That's all he said to me the whole night. And then party busted up a little bit while later, and I went back to the quarter, and I remember I took some of the acid and was just walking around the French Quarter, enjoying myself, listening to all the music and looking at the architecture. I always loved the French Quarter; it's just a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And I was telling myself, well, I didn't. My dream is all but over, and it didn't happen. But at least I can go home knowing that Robert Palmer, of all people, liked my playing.
Yeah.
And he has always used nothing but the very best drummers,
Agreed. Yeah.
always. And I was like, well, at least I can, say, hey, he liked me, so I can live with that. So I go back and I'm packing up in LA 2 days before the year is up. I get a phone call. And I'd actually had the phone turned off, and it was supposed to be off, but for some strange reason, it was still on. I answered the phone. It was Dave Harper. It was Robert's manager.
Whoa.
And he said, hey, what you doing today? I said, well, I'm packing up, getting ready to go back to Louisiana, go to work with my dad. He goes, yeah, we heard about that. He goes, well, listen, Robert's in the middle of doing a record down here. And I said, where is down here? He goes, Nassau. He lives in Nassau. I'm like, oh, that's terrible. And he goes, but he really heard something in New Orleans that he really liked, and he wants you to come down here and play on his record. I was stunned. I mean, just completely in a state of shock. And the first thing that hit me is I don't want to get on the airplane, go all the way down there, only to be told you're not good enough.
Right.
And it's going to be embarrassing, and so I thought about it for a second, and I told him, I said, listen, I've been out here for a year, and I've tried and tried and tried, and I have not gotten anywhere. I'm obviously not as good as I had hoped I was. So I'm going to have to say no. I'm going to have to say thank you very much. I'm flattered as hell. Once again, a great thing that I can take with me back to Louisiana, and always feel good about that.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I'm going to have to say no, thank you. And he hesitated for a second. He goes, well, let's look at it this way. He goes, we've already bought the ticket. It's leaving this afternoon in about 5 hours. So why don't you get on that airplane and come down here? Because Robert heard something that he liked, and he's asked me to contact you. Now, oddly enough, he was going to be using Joe Galdo. He was using his band that he had been touring with. It was the same band that he was going in the studio with.
Right.
But Joe Galdo was a member of a band called Foxy, and it's kind of a disco band, and they had a big, big hit. And so Joe Galdo checked out and left to go, fulfill his obligation to his band.
Right.
And it left the drum chair open, and Robert said, hey, I heard this guy in New Orleans, give him a call. And that's how they got in touch with me. But he goes, listen, just get on that airplane, come down here, and if it doesn't work out, stay a week on the beach on us. We'll pick up the tab, and that way you can go, back to work with your dad, and everybody will be okay about it. He goes, but you never know about these things, because he heard something that he liked. Well, I was like, what have I got to lose? I mean, God Almighty. This will be my last shot, and I might as well take it. I said, what time was that flight? And I got on the plane, went down there. And when I went to the house, it was already nighttime there. And it was an amazing event. He had African music playing, which there was no world music in Tower Records yet.
Right, right.
All you got was top 40, in record stores. There was no world music yet. And he had real African music. I mean, and it wasn't Tarzan with Johnny Weissmuller either. It was the real stuff. And there was people talking different languages from all over the world there. Yeah. And Sue, his wife, was making Indian food. And when he and I met, it was as if we had known each other, and through many lifetimes. He felt it. I felt it. It was a really strange thing. But I did. I was like, I know this guy. It's odd. But anyway, we had a great dinner, and it's a wonderful evening. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the evening, he goes, well, listen, the studio's right across the street.
Yeah.
Why don't we go over there? Kit's already set up and everything. Why don't we go over there and make a little music? And I'm like, oh, God, here we go. I got to face this again, and I'm going to go over there. And this is such a great party, and I feel like these are my people, but here we go. Okay, whatever. I said, sure, let's go make some music. We go across the street. He calls out a song called In Walks Love Again.
Right.
And Jack, who ended up being one of my best friends of life, he was the keyboardist at the time. He's no longer with us. Mm-hmm. But he started playing this real bubbly B3 pattern. And it was second line, which second line is a traditional New Orleans parade drum, of which after Dr. John, I knew that shit backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
So I'm like, boom, I jumped right in it, and we played the whole song and we finish. And Robert looks at me, he goes, "That's a keeper. We got a track."
Awesome.
And he goes, "Go unpack your bags. You got a gig if you want it."
Whoa.
Holy shit. I mean, down to 2 days before a year was up. And
Right.
that happened.
And the invisible
And
hands led you there, right?
yeah, the invisible hands, like I said, I listen to them. When they tell me to do shit, I listen. And it always requires struggle. It
Yes.
always is not anything remotely easy. It's tough. And it flies in the face of everything. But when I listen to them, unbelievable things happen. And of course, that was the beginning of a best friendship and a 25-year musical relationship. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And it was with the guy who I wanted to play with beyond everybody else. So it worked out okay.
That's amazing. I want to get deep into Robert in a minute, but I have a couple other questions.
Sure.
When you were growing up, were your parents creative?
No, not at all.
Not at
Neither
all.
one.
Wow.
No, neither. Now they were young. They had me when they were 21, and so and I was born in Memphis. And so there was one day, I don't think I was yet a year old. And my dad kept holding up these 245 records, little white
Yeah.
sleeves,
Right.
and one was a purple inside and the other one was a blue inside. He kept holding these things up saying, "Boy, I got a surprise for you." And we went into this room where this machine was that I love to play with. Stuff went round and round and back and forth and up and down. And all of a sudden he put the 45 on there and he turned the thing and it started moving of its own accord. I'm like, oh, I finally get to figure out, what this thing is about. And first song was the Blue Label. That was All Shook Up by Elvis Presley. The purple one was Fats Domino, I'm Walking. And that was the first music I ever heard. And I was a musician from that day on. And strictly the beat. I love the beat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the only creative thing that ever happened between my mom and my dad, because my father was a businessman. They didn't listen to music. They
Right.
didn't do anything in the arts. I mean, nothing. My mom was a dedicated housewife, but that was it. Now, the good thing is at that time, music, of course, was hugely popular. And especially in South Louisiana, the Cajun people love music. They love dancing. They love drinking. So there was tons of gigs everywhere. Now, the competition was fierce, but I was young.
Right.
And I started playing real young. So I was always able to work with older guys wearing a fake mustache.
So
So but I never had any sort of creative things come from them at all. Matter of fact, just the opposite.
so it sounds like you were in a very creative environment with very supportive parents. So
They were incredibly supportive. They always said, we're not really crazy about the things you're doing, but if you take care of yourself and don't be don't act a fool, get arrested, some stupid stuff, take care of your grades, do well in school. And I always kept a 3.3 average. And they said, as long as you, take care of yourself and take care of your schooling, yeah, well, so they let me be myself.
that's
They were
incredible.
incredibly supportive in that respect. And matter of fact, when I told my dad that I had to go check music out, we had a meeting in his office. I said, I need to go do this because I've been playing music all my life and I can't just walk away from it.
Yeah.
And he stood up, shook my hand. He goes, what can I do to help you? Let's make sense of this so you can have the best shot you can have. So they were always like that. They were always incredibly supportive. So I couldn't have asked for better parents in that respect.
That's amazing. Do you think that creativity can help people that are struggling with depression or things like anxiety? And I want to add to that. I listened to another podcast interview with you. I think it was Jamie Eads on the drum shuffle. And at one point, you had to go into exile because this is what you said. You were disappointed with your creativity and the person you had become. So
completely.
how did you use the improvisational, creative, or invisible hands part of yourself to overcome what you were struggling with then?
Well, I was with the band called Brooks and Dunn at that time.
Right, country band, yeah.
Yeah, I'd already played with Patti LaBelle. I'd already done a stint with her. And matter of fact, Robert was pretty much retired from making music. We did Honey,
Yeah.
which EMI did nothing with. And so he didn't even tour, nothing. And he made greatest hits from there to fulfill his obligation to the record companies. But he was done.
Yeah.
My time with him was pretty much done. We were still best friends. I'd go spend Christmas and New Year's with him,
Right.
But I was with Brooks and Dunn, and none of it ever, even though I love Patty, I must admit that she was a sweetheart and she cooked great and took great care of us, and she defended me. There was fans that sometimes would give her problems because I was white.
Yeah.
And she said, "You don't understand. There was auditions there that whole day, and out of all those people we saw, and they all were black, he was the best one. So I
Yeah.
don't want to hear about you." She always supported me.
That's great.
But admittedly, Brooks and Dunn, it wasn't a terrible gig, but it was like being in the army or something, which I never was. But I didn't have the camaraderie that I had with Robert.
Right.
I wasn't making the records like I was with Robert. I wasn't part of the writing. I wasn't part of the producing. I was just a guy who show up on time, play your gig.
Right.
And I didn't feel good about it. It wasn't enriching me as I had been with Robert.
No passion.
And I'd be in the back writing short stories on my Mac and listening to Pantera while the rest of the band would be up front listening to really shitty country music and drinking green beer. There was a big disconnect. And I was just bummed out. It's like, if this is going to be my life now in music, is having to take gigs like this so that my drum companies are all happy, that
Right.
I'm doing big things, that they can take ads for me, and all these things. If this is what I've got to do, I'm really not enjoying this. And I'd already been taking photographs already, but never really pursuing it. I just got really depressed about it and was unhappy.
Understood.
And this went on for a couple of years. And then well, here we go back to the Invisible Hands again. They've played a big part of my life, so I'll keep referring to them.
Yeah.
But one morning, I woke up and bam! I mean, as soon as I woke up, quit your job, sell
Wow.
everything you have, pay off all your debt, move to the middle of nowhere, take a serious vow of poverty, and write a novel.
Whoa. That's pretty heavy.
I'd only written postcards at this point in time, so I was like, well, but I wanted to laugh it off, but yet it came from the invisible hands.
Yeah.
I can't laugh it off. And eventually that's what happened. There's a buddy of mine who had a 2,000-acre ranch. He had had a robbery because he lived in Houston and his place was in Chapel Hill, Texas. It's about an hour and a half outside of Houston.
Okay.
And I had these Rottweiler dogs. They were my planet of women. And so I just told him, I said, well, I can go live at your place. I said, but I got to write this novel. I don't know where that's going to come from. But if you need someone to watch over your place, I said, I've got to move to the middle of nowhere and write this novel. And if you can cut me some slack as far as, not charge me rent or anything, I'll look after your place and take care of it for you.
Amazing.
And it all fell into place.
Wow.
So that directive I got from them, it all fell into place about within 3 months.
Wow. I noticed that you posted on Facebook a quote by one of my favorite writers, William Burroughs, and it says, "Only those who can leave behind everything they have ever believed in can hope to escape." So it seems to go along with that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. And then that led to so many other things like your photography, your writing. That's really amazing that you had the resilience to listen to the invisible hands.
Yeah, and that was the thing is when I went down there, he made a deal. He goes, "What do you think you're going to be here for? You know, what, a year, or two?" Or I said, "I think probably a couple of years. It'll give me a chance to kind of feel my way out of this and see what happens." It ended up being about 4 years,
Whoa.
but I did write the novel, got that done. But the main thing that hit me when I was down there was I knew I had all these other talents, as a photographer. I knew I wanted to go further with my drumming.
Right.
I was really good playing, with Robert as far as on stage and in the studio,
Yeah.
but I wanted to be better as a drummer.
Right.
I wanted to be a session drummer. I wanted to be able to make records with anybody and make it sound right.
Right.
And so I just told myself, I was like, well, whenever I come out of this, I've just got to learn to diversify.
Yes.
That was the main thing, diversify,
Yeah.
and pursue all these other things that you've got. And of course, that's pretty much what's happened after I came out of exile.
Right.
Was And I don't care whether if it was photography, like I did that for a number of years and I found my, when I was taking pictures of rust and it looks like paintings,
Yeah.
and I got really good at it. I still love the things I got.
Yeah,
Um,
I love your photography. It's otherworldly.
I couldn't be more thrilled about it. And that was a funny thing. I discovered that when I was in exile. Bunker, that was the fellow who owned the ranch. He knew that I liked photography, and he also dabbled in it. But he brought me down a macro lens one time. He goes, "Here, why don't you play around with this and see if you like it?" He goes, "Just keep it, while you're here, and see what happens with it." And I didn't even know there was such a thing as a macro lens. That was all news to me.
Yeah.
But I had a old Nicormat camera that I'd bought when I was on the road with Brooks and Dunn. I bought it from a pawn shop up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I put that macro lens on one day and went out, taking hikes with the girls every day. We just go walking all over the place on the property. And I was taking pictures I remember tree bark looked like a whole nother world to me.
Yeah.
Uh, and all sorts of other things. And then he had some old rusted out uh, bush hog and stuff for his tractors. And I'll never forget taking a picture of this one thing of rust. And I remember like going, whoa, that looked really interesting. And I went to the Walmart, which is about 40 miles away,
Okay.
and I got a little, I don't know what you would call them. It's like a little photo sheet. They're little bitty things. So you don't have to get all of them blown up. You can just look at any ones you want to get copies of.
Right.
And I remember looking at that one of the rust I took, and I was like, that looks supercalifragilistic. And I got them to blow that one up, and it was stunning to me. Stunning. I mean, with the fractalization and the colors and
Yeah.
the textures. And so I bought another roll of film right then and there, even though that was not on my budget. And I came back, spooled the film on there. I ran out to that bush hog again, and I got down to take a picture of it, and the camera jammed.
Oh
It
no.
was it was over. The camera was over. So I had to sit on that idea for 10 years until I came out of my vow of poverty. I was able to afford the camera that I wanted,
Okay.
which was a D90, a Nikon. And yeah, but I had to wait 10 years to be able to do it.
That's
And
patience. A lot of
and
patience.
then I started going at it, and I saw a photographer I really liked on Facebook, and I contacted him, and he was the best guy I could have ever met. And we would go out every Sunday, and we'd go to all these strange little bohunk towns in Texas. And he liked torn up shit and stuff, but he didn't like the macro. That was my thing.
Right.
But we liked the same kind of things.
Yes.
So we would go to these little towns every Sunday, and for, I mean, like 2 or 3 years, And then we had a break for a year, and then we did 2 or 3 more years. But during those times, that 4 years of taking, I've got a really good selection of shots.
Who was your friend that you were going around
A-
with?
Andrew Stearns.
Okay. Yeah. They do look like paintings. The first time I saw them, I really thought they were.
That's what people seem to think they are. So I don't tell them any different. But and that's and that's what I want them to look like, because I like Henry Cartier-Bresson,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a thing about don't crop. You
Yeah.
know, mess around with it until you see it, and then that's it. That
Yes.
is the thing.
Yeah.
So with my macro lens, I would go up and down, around, and until I would see it, and it would be a complete painting. Then I would take it.
I love it.
So yeah, I took that sort of knowledge in with me, and I was very, very, very happy about what I found and what I was able to get out of it. I'm real pleased.
Yeah, that's amazing.
One day, hopefully, something will happen. Now, interestingly enough, I sell them in in editions of two.
Okay.
I sell them in 4 different sizes and in editions of two only, and so they're not cheap.
Right.
I learned a long time ago, if you're going to sell something like that, put a price tag on it, because otherwise, if you don't do it, people don't think that they're worth a damn.
That's true.
You know, but if they have to pay a little bit, they'll appreciate it a lot more, and they did. But it was able to, while I was becoming a session player there in Austin, which is where I eventually ended up moving to, it was able to really help me stay alive.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you put your heart and soul into them, so it's worth the money.
Absolutely, completely.
All right, I want to get into Robert Palmer, but first I've got to say, I've always loved Robert Palmer's music and your drumming, but it's almost criminal that every time I ask people, do you like Robert Palmer? And they just go, oh, Addicted to Love. And I'm like, no, that's a great song, but there's so much more than that if you do a deep dive. And my first question to you is, when I find something that I like, I do a deep dive. But the problem with Robert Palmer is there's no biography. There's no documentary. Up until recently, there was like a really antiquated website that had almost no information. So my first question is, why isn't there a lot of information out there other than his music?
Well, when he died, there were some problems with the estate.
Okay.
And the estate only got settled just a few months ago.
Oh my gosh. And Robert died, what, 2003? That's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. But that was the problem. Is I had a brilliant documentary filmmaker, Emma Franz, out of Australia. She's made a couple of my favorite documentaries of life.
Okay.
Intangible Asset number 82 in particular.
Yeah.
But she read one of my stories I'd written about Tio Macero that I'd posted on Facebook, and she contacted me. She goes, I think you and I could probably do some work together. And I was like, well, interestingly enough, because that's what always drove me crazy about Robert, was no one knew beyond that video, that song,
and
his suits. People know nothing else about him.
They dismiss everything else.
Yeah, he got real short shrift from the press in America.
Right.
I don't know why, but people just, I don't know why, they just didn't write about him.
Yeah.
And he didn't pursue that, because his whole thing was, if I get the music right, that's really all I care about. I'm not here to try to become this huge success, you know.
Yeah.
He was never approaching it from that angle.
It was
all
art.
about being pure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And but it always drove me crazy, because I worked and lived with the guy for 20 some odd years. I know how great he is. He's one of the greatest musical artists that ever was.
Yeah.
And the life that we led, and where we did things and how we did things. I mean, people, it would just blow their minds if they only knew. And so I think that was one of the reasons why I became a writer, and I've been working on the story now.
Oh, good. So we're going to, at least from you, we're going to hear some details.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're going to get my perspective, of course. but it's going to give you a snapshot of what was really happening, what was going on.
Yeah. I,
And because that's always been the thing that's bugged me is that people just don't know. They have no clue. And I always tell people, start at the very beginning with Sneak and Sally, and
yeah.
then just listen to each record.
Yeah.
Just take them one by one.
Yeah.
And by the time you finish, you will have a whole different opinion of the guy. You know,
The journey is astounding.
it's stunning. It's stunning. And the record, the caliber of music
Yes.
and the caliber of musicians.
Right.
It was all just the very best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
And people just don't know. And so it's always driven me a little crazy.
Same. Yeah.
That people don't know, but like I said, the estate was in a state of flux, and I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, but now that that's been settled, maybe some stuff will start to happen. Now we'll see.
I hope so. And the image that most people see, even mostly that I see, is here's this very serious guy doing this one song. But I was doing a deep dive into videos the other day, and I found him on Jay Leno, a pretty old clip, but he was so silly and so funny. And I wanted to ask you about his sense of humor. I've never seen that side. He was telling a really funny story about his kids and his dog. And I just saw this whole other side of him. How much did sense of humor have to do with you guys collaborating?
Oh, huge. Yeah, I mean, huge. He was a very, very well-rounded individual. Like, I'm really happy that I met him for more reasons than just music, because his father was basically James Bond. I mean, he was MI6. I mean, he was,
Wow.
and that's why they lived in Malta and Northern Africa and all those places, because his dad was being James Bond.
Yeah.
And so yeah, all these he got an education from his father, Les. And Robert taught me about painting. He taught me about writing. He taught me about tailoring. He taught me about food. He taught me about wine and spirits. He just, everything that he loved that makes life worth living in the creative world, he knew and did the very best at it. So he was an incredibly cultured guy, but he also was a total blast to hang with and funny. I mean, we had fun. I know people get tired of me saying it, but I always tell people, yeah, we did this, we had fun because we enjoyed everything that we got into. But I'm so thankful that I met him because he educated me. He was like my mentor for music specifically, but then he taught me about all these other things, of which I incorporated into my photography, my writing. I mean, he turned me on to Charles Bukowski, he turned me on to William Burroughs. I mean, he just was an incredibly cultured guy. And it was almost like I called him a cross between James Bond and Flash Gordon, because he just seemed he had access to everything in the world and was so knowledgeable about everything and so talented at everything. And it blew me away. So it just always has driven me crazy that people just have no clue about him.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of like my thing is always, I wanted to expose him to the world so that they knew how great of an individual he was.
Yeah, and that's why I want to ask you about a lot of things that nobody talks about that you guys did. I've listened to a lot of great interviews with you, but it's often about, a lot of the hits and the singles. The one album that I had forgot about, I've been listening to on repeat for about 5 days, is Live at the Apollo. Oh my God. The musicianship on here, and I've got to tell, especially my younger students, there was no Beat Detective back then. There was no auto-tune. You guys just absolutely blew my mind. My favorite Robert Palmer song has always been Flesh Wound. And I love Tony Thompson. I love Tony Thompson's performance on the recording, but you took it to another level. And I remember back then in the late 80s, a lot of times I would hear a recording of a band, but then I'd hear them live and a lot of them weren't that good. You guys were better. These are becoming my favorite versions. I can't believe Woke Up Laughing, how it breaks down to a cappella section. Tell me a little bit about that recording and the band. I mean, the band is just sick. The bass player,
Well,
Frank Blair, right?
Frank Blair. Oh God, we stole Frank from Marvin Gaye. Matter of fact, Robert and I were over in Paris at the Countess Troscadero's house. We were having dinner, just he and I one night with her and some friends. And he bought a Marvin record called Hear My Dear.
Right.
Now, Hear My Dear showed Marvin on the cover. One side he's an angel, the other side he's a devil, and he's playing chess with himself. Now, the album was interesting in that it was called Hear My Dear because he basically, in his divorce with his wife, she got the whole thing 100%.
Okay.
And that's why he called it Hear My Dear, because she made all the money from it. But Frank was the bass player on that. And we had been looking for a bass player. The first 3 records I had done with him, which was Secrets and then Clues and then Maybe It's Live. And we had been looking, and I was playing with Kenny Gradney. I was playing with Phil Chin, Bob Glob. I mean, I was playing with a bunch of really great bass players.
Yeah.
But nothing seemed to work with Robert. It's just something about none of it fit. Don't know why. But we're listening to this Hear My Dear record, and the bass playing was fearless, melodic.
Yes.
Just the most beautiful playing. We kept looking at each other like, do you hear this? Are you hearing what I'm hearing? I mean, you get this? I'm like, yo, yes, this guy is amazing. Well, he had his manager, David, call Marvin's management the next day. And because we had just got through cutting Pride.
Right.
But there was no bass on it yet. Because Robert was a really good bass player.
Really?
Oh yeah, he could play anything. He could play anything. Yeah, he could play anything and everything. And he was good at all of it. But there was no bass on the Pride record as of yet. But he got a hold of Frank and said, hey, will you come down to Nassau and play bass on the record? And I remember we met in London to do some television shows. And that's when I first heard what Frank had done on the record, and he exceeded our expectations.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was, here's our guy. We have found our guy. This is the bass player that we've always wanted. And yeah, and even when, as we went along, Frank started having some mental problems.
Okay.
Paranoid schizophrenic.
Yeah. And
it became very difficult to deal with him. But we still used him all through every record. And he God is playing. It's just, he's one of the greatest bass players I've ever heard in my life. He could have played with Miles. He could have played with Weather Report. He could have played with anybody.
It's beyond bass. It was like this voice, this melodic voice.
Yeah, well, Flesh Wound, that's an actual bass exercise that he was doing.
Yeah.
And Robert recorded it, unbeknownst to Frank. He was just warming up on the back porch playing this thing.
Cool.
And Robert just recorded it and made a song out of it.
Yeah. It's a bizarre song, but God, everything about it is so cool.
Yeah. And we also were in line to do the tour of Riptide.
Okay.
And Robert had hired this fellow out of London. Robert lived a life of serendipity. He never planned anything.
Wow.
You know, he never said, "Ooh, this engineer is really good. Let's use him." He would meet someone and then just use them.
Yeah.
And he just happened to run into this guitar player over in England. And they obviously got along in some fashion, but we were in rehearsals there in Toronto, and this guy was not happening. And Robert had his hands full because Jack, our Waldman, our keyboardist, he and Robert and I were like the Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
We had this thing, you know. And then once we found Frank, boom, we were locked.
Right.
Jack got cancer and couldn't go on the Riptide tour with us. So Robert was having to train all these keyboard players to do the stuff that Jack did really easily, but no one could cop it. And so he was having to spend a ton of time with the keyboardist. And I'm listening to the guitar player, and I'm like, this ain't it. It's just not it. And of course, we had just worked with Eddie Martinez, and Jeff Bova and Bernard Edwards. Of course, Bernard produced the record, but Eddie was part of his New York crew that he brought down, and as was Tony. Tony started the record, and Robert called me, and I ended up finishing the record.
Okay.
That's when I played on Discipline of Love and some
Right.
other things. But that's when I met Eddie and Jeff and everybody, and I became really good friends with them. But I was in New York. I flew down from Toronto to New York City to basically say goodbye to Jack. I knew he was on the way out, and I had to see him before it was too late.
Right.
And so while I was there, and I got to see him, tell him I loved him, and he was gone 2 weeks later.
Mm.
But while I was in town, I called Eddie Martinez, and I was like, you need to think about maybe coming out on tour with us. I know you're a huge session guy here in New York, and I know you're doing great stuff, and I can't ask you to, throw a stick in those spokes, but you really would enjoy working with Robert. If you liked him that much in the studio, well, it's even better live.
Yeah.
Because we just are doing all kind of material. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
So eclectic.
Completely, we'll go from playing funk stuff to playing Eat the Rich, by Motorhead. I mean, we were just doing all kinds of
And
stuff.
then Riptide, this swing song.
Completely. But anyway, I end up talking Eddie into coming aboard. And that was part of the band that you heard on the Live at the Apollo.
Yeah. The band
is
so tight. It's crazy.
We always had great bands, and Robert, like I said, he demanded a lot. You had to play really good to hang with Robert, but he would also help you and teach you along the way. Like when we do covers, it wasn't just about copying what someone had done who wrote it. It was about bringing something to the table, elevating it, and making it sound so special it sounded like Robert had written the damn thing.
Yeah.
And that's how we approach covers all the time. And we were always listening to music. He was a musicologist, a serious musicologist. Matter of fact, the best one I'd ever met in my life. So it was just music all the time. And I'm a music junkie. So yeah, we were all the time putting in little funny little things. Gary Newman, that's how all that got started with Clues.
Right. He played on one track, right?
Sure did. Yeah. Robert actually sent him a fax. Robert loved to write faxes. He wrote longhand. But we were down there in Nassau doing the Clues record, and it's a whole big story of how we met. And I don't want to take up all your time with this, but yeah, it's a whole big story. It's in the book.
Yeah.
But how the Gary Newman, Robert heard the song Car that Gary had a huge hit with. And I had this great stereo, and one night we're in Salem, Massachusetts. He comes knocking on my door, and we listen to that song all night long.
Song.
I'm like, I don't know where this is going, but he likes this song. And so anyway, we go there and come to find out the first record, Secrets, we cut as a band. All live in the studio, all cutting as a band. Clues, he had bought these two little toys in Tokyo, the Wasp and the Spider.
Yeah.
They were these German machines, and they were toys.
Right.
Little fake yellow and black plastic keyboards, fake. But one of them was a drum machine, and the Wasp, and then the Spider was a bass sequencer.
Okay.
Well, when I came down to do the record, there was no other musicians there. I'm like, well, where's everybody else? He goes, there is no everybody else. I was like, well, what are you talking about? And he goes, you're going to be playing with bass sequences. And I'm like, what? And yeah, that's what we did. And then as we're doing this, I would just play. Robert never told me what to play except twice. And you can ask me that question later. But he just said, play whatever you want to play. Whatever comes to your head, whatever comes to your mind, just do it. And he had written a letter to Gary's management. And because he had heard that he was having to get away from the British press. And so he was a pilot, and he was going to be flying around the world to get away from the British press. So Robert wrote his management, said, well, have him stop down in the Bahamas. We're going to be doing this record, and part of the reason I'm doing it the way I'm doing it is because of Gary Newman's car. So it'd be fun if he would come down and maybe be a part of this. And that's what happened. He did. He came down, and that's when we cut I Dream of Wires, and then they wrote Found You Now.
Yeah.
And then him and his bass player, I think his name was Paul Gardnier or something. At any rate, they played in the studio with me the next day. So yeah, but every record that we ever did, it was a completely different process than the time before. Nothing was ever repeated. It was always a brand new process, a whole new way of making music. And Robert just liked to shake things up and keep it new and fresh,
Yeah, even on that live album, Looking for Clues is so different than on the album.
Yeah.
It's really, really heavy. So what you were saying about making covers your own, it sounds like he even did that with his his own songs, right? He kept reinventing them.
Yeah, and of course that was another beautiful thing is that was a good tour, and one of the beautiful things was being able to play the Apollo. I mean, yeah.
What was that like? Yeah.
Oh, it was amazing. The history that goes into that place. And there you are on the stage where all these other people have been. It was a heavy thing, but wonderful, sweet,
Did you guys film that show, or is it only audio?
Only audio.
Oh, that is too bad.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of filming and camera phones, and that really wasn't happening back then yet. But he recorded several things. Matter of fact, one of my favorite shows that we ever did was when we opened for UB40 over at that I forget the name of the soccer stadium, because we were using, when we would cut a record and when they get the drum sounds all up, they would drop all the drum sounds onto DAT.
Right.
And then I had triggers on all my acoustic drums, and I'm triggering the actual sounds that we used on the record.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Okay.
But only using pieces of them. So that's also why you're hearing the drums just keep changing.
Yes.
On that record, they're constantly changing because we're using the sounds that we recorded with, and different percentages of each.
How did you guys do for Some Like It Hot? I can tell what you're playing, and is there a track like the tom melody that is over the groove? How did you do that, or was that the percussionist?
That was a percussionist. We always worked with really good. That was Bree Howard.
Yeah.
That was that percussionist on the Live at the Apollo. Now, we ended up using the last tour we did in 91. We used Jose Rossi, who was from Weather Report and some other things. Him and Eddie actually grew up together. They were childhood friends.
Yeah.
So I was very happy. We always had.
So there's no sequences on that live recording. There's always people playing live, right?
Well, there are some, like on Looking for Clues, that that bass sequence, we're playing to that.
Oh, okay.
And You're in My System, that sequence there. So there's 2 or 3 songs that we're using sequences,
right?
But the band is playing with the sequence. But those are the only ones. The rest of it is just us playing.
Yeah, and you guys are so good, you can't tell. I wanted to ask you, 2 of my favorite drummers are you and Bill Bruford. And as far as I know, you were the first 2 guys that I saw playing what they call now a hybrid kit. You guys had some acoustic, some electronic. What was that like? And how were you just trying to make the way the record sound happen? Because I think I saw there's a live video of you, and to your right you had Simmons drums, and to the left you had your acoustic.
Yeah, Robert was, like I said, we started using the technologies as they became available. Like I said, Clues, we were using the toys.
Right.
But that's what was available. Then between the Maybe It's Live and the Pride record, the Simmons drums had come out.
Yes.
So we got some of those, And there also was a German company called Dynacord.
Yes, I remember them.
And we got that to be able to put in the sounds that we got, and we put them on DAT, and then we had them drop down and burned into the Dynacord machine.
Wow.
So we started using lots of stuff to make the sound that much better and that much more interesting. And it was always used as a way to make the songs even better, you know?
Yeah, use the
And
technology as a creative tool. That's amazing.
absolutely, completely, you know? And like I said, we didn't go too crazy with it. You know, we just used it to whatever was to our advantage and to what made for a great show, made a great show better.
Yeah.
So,
How
yeah, we were always checking out stuff.
how about on Honeybee? I am so stuck on that song right now. It's so crazy. First of all, what kind of drum kit were you using? It's so tight and I don't know, everything going on in that song, even the keyboard solo at the end. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's an interesting choice that you picked that song because again, when I got with Robert, he was teaching me things
Right.
because he was just well versed in music from all over the world. He had worked with a guy, African percussionist named Gasper Lawal.
Okay.
And Gasper taught him all sorts of things. And from there, he took off on his own. But he was teaching me, you know, rhythms from all over the world and sounds from all over the world. And that is something that became part of his mentoring and teaching me
Yeah.
was that. And every album, it was something new. It was something different. You know, we were making hybrids of all kind of music from all over the world, and because when I got with him, he started writing songs. Up until then, he had only done covers.
Right.
But it's almost like he saw me as the guy who was going to be able to do all this wide variety of stuff, and so he got me, and that much happened. But yeah, every record was all new rhythms and new things and new sounds and new textures and tonalities and rhythms and just all of it.
And pushing
Now,
boundaries.
completely. And then by the time we got to Honey A and B, which is what you're talking about,
Yeah. Second track.
it was the song that we put everything, and when I say everything, I mean everything
Yeah.
that I had learned from him,
Yeah.
I was able to put it into the performance because he had the way we did that last record is they had what they call a Korg, the wave station.
PPG wave.
Uh, no, the PPG was back on Pride and stuff.
Okay.
That's what we were doing with this. Now this was a Korg, Korg,
Right.
and it's the wave station, and it's a little workstation. And so, and like I said, Robert could play anything. And when I came in to do that record, he had everything written out sonically, everything. I mean, he could have just released that as it was,
Yeah.
and it would have been okay. But he liked humans because they brought the energy with it,
Of course.
which is true. Um, Now they machines got more and more adaptable as time went on. Like Trent Reznor, he can do anything with the machine.
Right.
But at any rate, by the time we came in to do Honey, he had everything written on the core wave station,
Yeah.
workstation. So I was playing drums by myself without anybody else, but I was playing with all the rest of the instrumentation as it was. He just had humans come in and replace the instrumentation he had written into the chord.
Right.
And he started with me. And so once I got all the drum things done, then the performances were there. Then everybody else, well, now you know, sonically we've described it, rhythmically we've described it. So if you want to come hang in this little village with us, well, you've got to bring the right sounds and the right rhythms to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And but on that song, the one you're talking of, Honey A and B,
Yep.
that was literally it was what we took everything that we had learned that he had taught me, and I was able to put it into that one performance.
Yeah.
I mean, completely everything that I had learned. You know, the bass drum keeps changing from downbeats to upbeats,
Yeah.
which is an African thing.
Yeah.
But it was all the sounds and stuff that we were doing. I mean, we were just doing, and that there was an amazing thing about that particular song because it represented everything that I
Yeah.
had ever learned from him, all in one song.
It's like a grand finale.
Yep, completely, completely.
Yeah, you and I've talked about movies a lot. I love movies. My favorite movie is Brazil by Terry Gilliam.
Ah, good
And
one.
it's such a dense movie that every time I watch it, I hear something different. And I think the same thing with Honey Bee. I actually, the first time I heard it, I pulled the car over. I was like, what? What is going on? I kept having to bring it back to the beginning. It took 2 or 3 listens to really wrap my head around it. It's such an incredible song.
Yeah, and that's the thing is there's a lot going on in all of our songs.
Yeah.
Rhythmically, tonality, texturally, and then of course he's writing lyrically, melodically. He was a brilliant writer. I mean, he was a brilliant writer. And that's another thing that drives me crazy is people are familiar with "Addicted," which was a song he had in a dream.
Whoa,
He
really?
had a little dictaphone he kept by his bed, and he called me. I was back in L.A. and he called me from Nassau, and he goes, "I think I caught a big one." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I had a dream last night, and it was this song called "Addicted to Love." He goes, "Here, listen," and he played me a little bit of it, and it was, of course, a very rough sketch,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was rough enough to where all the ideas were there. But yeah, he managed to wake up and snagged it from a dream, which most of the time when you dream something, you forget it right away as soon as you wake up. But
Yeah.
it was obviously clear enough to where it stayed with him.
Wow.
But he was such a brilliant writer, and that's a whole other thing that drives me crazy is
Yeah.
people have no idea how great of a writer he is. And again, hybrids of using musics from all over the world, together in various forms and functions, and they're just great songs. I mean, really brilliant material. But again, people just don't know. They don't have any idea how great the guy was.
Hopefully they'll
Hopefully,
find
I'm
out.
going to be able to have something to do to change that a little bit. Hopefully.
I'm going to be the first guy to buy that book. I want to ask about one more song, More Than Ever. I was asking you about this the other day.
Oh,
That song is
yeah,
crazy how it goes from 7 to 4 back and forth, and
yeah.
just the way that it's mixed. It's a crime that nobody has heard that song. I absolutely love it. Tell me a little bit about how you guys made that.
Well, I remember that was the first record where he started using me to work on pre-production.
Okay. And to
And
listeners,
Frank,
what does that mean to the listeners out there, like my younger students?
pre-production means, he's got rough ideas that he has put into various machines that he was using. I forget the name of the machine. I think it was the PPG.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he was using back then because that was Heavy Nova.
Yep.
But he was still living in the Bahamas.
Okay.
We had already done Riptide. That was done, but he had yet to move over there. But that's where we did pre-production on the record, and we were listening. Frank and I were there, and we were listening to all the rough ideas, and then we were putting in our ideas with him. And the 7 thing that came from me. I figured that would be kind of a cool start,
Yeah.
like whiplash, giving you a little bit of whiplash. But it was a brilliant song. I love the drums on it. Eddie also played some brilliant guitar. Frank,
Yeah.
oh God, that bass track on that is ridiculous. Now the interesting thing about that is a guy named Tim Kramer, who was a strange little fella. He was about 5 foot tall, and his clothes looked like they were just a wrinkled mess because he couldn't stop pacing and grabbing himself and just he was a nervous wreck, but he was a brilliant engineer.
Yeah.
He had learned under Rob Fraboni, and Rob Fraboni was another great engineer out of Los Angeles. Ended up working with Keith Richards on a bunch of projects,
Oh, cool.
the Wingless Angels and all kind of stuff.
Great band.
At any rate, Eric E.T. Thorngren did the mix, of More Than Ever. Now, Eric painted with sound.
Yeah.
He didn't hear just, he didn't get the song kind of up and just sounding good. No, he would mess around and change stuff and add stuff and, change bass drum from on the 3 to 8 notes. And I mean, he did all sorts of interesting things with music. Like I said, he painted with sound.
Just the
But he
guitar
did,
part, how it's mixed. If you hear it in your car, the stereo mix is nuts.
yeah, yeah. Eddie had done a brilliant job. And but Eric came along in ET, we called him.
Yeah.
He mixed it and just put a hellified mix on it. And I mean,
Yeah.
it is super fucking duper. It really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an exceptional song. Boy, talk about fun to play live.
Yeah.
Oh
Live
my
at the
God.
Apollo, the version on there is totally different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were always messing with stuff. Robert was funny. Sound checks were a rehearsal.
Okay.
And every night we would record and we sometimes filmed, but we would sit and get on the bus because, like I said, he was a musicologist. It was music all the time.
Yeah.
So we would get on the bus and on our way to the next city, we'd be listening to what we had done that night, and he's making notes about things he wants to change, things he wants to attenuate. I want to change and drop guitar out for that, and there was just he had notes, this long to go into sound check with the next day. Now the interesting thing was that never stopped.
Yeah.
It would be the very last show of a 1.5 year tour, and he would still be making notes. And the very last sound check was a rehearsal.
Yeah.
He just never stopped. It was all the time changing and working and changing and working and making as great as we could make it. It never stopped making things better and better and better and better. Now, some people can think, you can overwork something like that. Well, some people, I guess, could, not him.
Yeah.
It was always making it better, making it more interesting.
Yeah, and you
Because
can tell by the progression of all the albums. What about I always wondered because I couldn't find any liner notes. The album Woke Up Laughing. Did you have anything to do with that? Because from what I've read, I love the album. It sounds like it's a bunch of remixes, re-recordings. I think it was supposed to originally be a best of album, but a lot of the songs were redone. Did you have anything to do with that?
No, it was here's how that came together. There's a fellow named Gerald Seligman. He's my friend on Facebook.
Okay.
He was working for Blue Note there in London, and he was paying attention because there would be these songs that we would do, usually one per record, like Woke Up Laughing was one.
Yeah.
History was another one.
Love that one.
And it would be little world music things.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible title, I know, but that's the closest I can come to explaining it.
Right.
It would be our little way of mashing things up. Honey A, Honey B was one.
Casting a Spell.
Casting a Spell, another. Yeah, there's a bunch of them, and we always usually would have one per record, and they were just weird little hybrids. That's what I call them. They were hybrids of all different kinds of world musics all together under one roof. And Gerald Seligman was listening to all of our records, and he liked all these little world things.
Yeah.
And it was his idea to take all of them and put them on one record.
Oh, cool.
Well, I'll never forget. I was over in Lugano with Robert, and he told me about this idea, and I was like, well, that's a fabulous idea.
Yeah.
I don't know why we never thought of that, but hey, wonderful. So anyway, my contribution to that record is I took the front cover photo.
Oh, that's right. I had read that.
Yeah, just his leg and on his boat. We were headed out to go snorkeling. That was down in Nassau, but that was a Polaroid SX70 shot that I had done, and I was over to see his son and his daughter, who I had not seen in several years, and he flew us all over there so we could all see each other again. And we'd always I'd have a slideshow set up of all the latest photos I've been doing because he was interested,
Yeah.
you know. And as soon as that SX70 shot came up, I remember Jim, his son, went, "Ooh, that would be a good cover for that new Woke Up Laughing record y'all are working on."
Yeah.
Robert went, "I think that's a fabulous idea." I said, "I think it is too." But yeah, that's where that record came from. There's Housework.
Yes.
There's all sorts of different ones. But what a fun record.
I know.
You know,
I suggest some people maybe check that out if they only know Addicted to Love, because that's a good preview into all the eclectic things that you guys have done over the
all
years.
of it. All of it. Yeah. It really is. And it's all fun. It all puts a big grin on your face, you know. Musically, very challenging, you know.
Yes.
It's some badass playing all over every song.
It
You
feels
know,
like
that
you're
cat.
walking through doorways to me.
Oh,
Especially Woke
completely.
Up Laughing. You hear the first half, and then it's like the dream changes and morphs into this whole other thing.
Well, there were songs that we ended up recutting as time went along.
Yeah.
And we had cut for the original record of Clues. That's when Woke Up Laughing came around.
Right.
And then after the 86 tour, the band was in such great shape. We came right off the stage in San Diego and went straight to LA and went straight into the studio
Yeah.
and finished up some work on a French film that we were working on, Sweet Lies. But we also paid attention to some of these recuts of some of this music, and one of them was Woke Up Laughing.
Right.
Because by that time we had played it so much, we kind of had a different take on it again. And so we ended up cutting it and doing it while we were up there at the end of the tour.
Yeah,
But
he was so talented rhythmically. To me, as a drummer,
oh,
I challenge anybody to sing along to a song like "Woke Up Laughing." The verses are so rhythmic, and the way that he layered his vocals, not only harmonically but rhythmically, they're crazy. Like "Housework" and "History." I've often thought, because I have a 7th and 8th grade choir,
mhm.
to do "History." It's such a beautiful song, even a cappella. What was it like? It almost seems like, because you're a great drummer, working with him, it was like working with another drummer, because his vocals, the
uh,
rhythmic value. What do you
yeah,
think?
that Woke Up Laughing was I've got a huge story about that song.
Okay.
It's a pretty long story. I don't know if you want to get into it now,
Well,
but
you can
basically,
go ahead. Tell me.
it's basically that's done in what they call the Imbiru style. Imbiru is Mbira, Imbiru, and that's a place in West Africa, and they'll sometimes have 2 and 3 time signatures going at the same time.
Yes.
And when we started to do that song, of course, I'm playing with that damn spider, the bass sequence.
Yeah.
And when I jumped into it, I know that it's got the totally different feels because he's singing one verse in one time, which is
Yes.
in the 6, and then he's singing the next verse in the 4, and it just keeps jumping around. And of course, that kept changing. He ended up writing more verses for it when we recut it in '86.
Yeah.
But when we did that song in '80 for Clues, I couldn't play with. I could play the patterns,
Right.
but I couldn't play with the spider. It felt too stiff. And I would tell them, shut that damn thing off. And here, I'll show you I can play this. And I would play it, and they go, okay. But Robert says, well, no, you've got to play with the spider. I'm like, why? He goes, well, first off, it has to work because it's math. So it's got to work. But two, I'm going to be triggering and doing stuff, and I need to have a sync pulse. Of course, I don't even know what the language is he's talking about. I'd never heard any of this shit
Right. Right.
because this is before drum machines. This is before any of that.
Wow.
And so I fought him for a whole week and a half. We would try to tackle it every day, and it was just too stiff, too stiff. It ain't going to work. Ain't going to work. It's got to work. Why? It's math. It's math. Drove me absolutely fucking crazy. and we go to other songs, and then I would cut the other songs, and we come back, try it again. Too stiff. It's math. It's got to work. Oh God. And anybody else would have fired me or
Yeah.
got someone else to come in and play that song.
Right. Right.
But he wanted me to learn this,
Yeah.
to understand it, because it was something down the way he was going to have to call on me to do on other stuff
Yeah.
that we haven't even crossed it yet. And one day I'm being brought into the studio, and I saw it was like the proverbial light bulb going off over your head. I was like, holy shit, wait a second. It is math. Yeah, it meets up at the 12, because he didn't try to beat me over the head with it. He just kept saying it's math. It'll
Yeah.
work. You're just going to have to figure this out on your own.
Right.
And one day I got it. I was on the way to the studio and was like, oh my God, he's correct. And I felt like such a dolt. I'm like, I can't believe I've been fighting him on this for a week and a half. But I ran in the studio and I was like, I got it. I got it. I have tethered the fatted calf. Sling that song on there and I'll get it. And I got it on the second take.
Well, he trusted you. That's great.
He knew that I was going to eventually get it, and that was his job, was to teach me and to push me into areas that I was uncomfortable with, to understand it, because he knew it was something that we would use down the way for something else. And so that was his job, was to teach me, and he always did.
That's amazing. Tell me about some of the music you're making these days. I went to your website and I listened to Knuckle Yummy and Donut Music, right? I love the organic sound of your drums. Makes me think a little bit of Jay Bellerose, who has like the old school.
Oh God, Jay's brilliant.
Yeah.
He's really brilliant. He's one of the really, really brilliant new drummers that's come up.
I agree. But your drumming on there is very organic and incredible and very different than the stuff I grew up listening to you play.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, again, when I was in Austin, I finally became the drummer I always wanted to be. And I'm talking about a drummer who can play anything and make it sound correct,
Yep.
make it have the right texture, make it, all of it. 2015 is when I became the drummer I always wanted to be.
Wow.
I eventually got there. It took me, 50 something years.
But you made it.
I got there, and by that time I had a great collection of all sorts of strange percussion, a lot of stuff from all over the world, a great collection of things. And again, Robert taught me, if we're going to do a cover, well, you can't just copy what they did. You've got to bring something to the table. And the stuff you heard with Knuckle Yummy was a lot of hit songs from the late 60s and early 70s that really meant something to me. And I wanted to, again, bring something to the table, make it different, make it ours, And I had found a engineer producer guy, Brian Beatty, there in Austin, who's I'm just so happy I found him. He's one of the best producer engineers guys I've ever met in my life. And that's who I did the majority of my work with there in Austin.
Beautiful recording.
But he's the guy that's working with me on the Knuckle Yummy stuff and also Donut Music. He was the bass player and the co-producer of Donut Music with me.
Yeah, I recommend everybody check that out. Really good stuff.
Yeah, it's great. Matter of fact, we recorded every night of Donut Music. And to me, that was everything I've ever learned. I found this girl, and she just was a brilliant writer, I mean, like one of the best writers I've ever met in my life. We were boyfriend and girlfriend for a while. But I was able to bring everything. Matter of fact, I worked on her material for a year.
Wow.
In pre-production before we even attempted to make music with it. And we did, and we played every Thursday at this place called the Townsend there in Austin. And I had this great engineer who was doing front of house with us, and he recorded every Thursday. So he's got all these things on tape, and hopefully I'll be able to do a whole record of donut music before I leave this planet. But that's some of the things that we had done just to go into the studio and knock some stuff out, But it's yeah, that's all that you heard on Knuckle Yummy and donut music. It's like everything I've ever learned my whole life, everything Robert taught me.
Yeah.
I was able to put it all into these pieces of music.
Yeah.
And I think it's what makes them sound and feel so differently. It's just I'm real happy we got that done.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
There's more to come.
I always ask everybody to respond to a quote. So this is by one of my favorite writers. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a female monk named Pema Chodron. Do you know her work at all? Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist monk. Okay, so
never heard that name.
She once said, to be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to be continually thrown out of the nest. To live fully is to be always in no man's land. To experience each moment as completely new and fresh. To live is to be willing to die over and over again. What do you think, Johnny?
Absolutely. There was a girl named Bernadette Devlin, and it said, to be what you want to be, you must be prepared to lose everything.
And you did that.
And that's the way I've lived my life. And so this woman, who I can't pronounce her name, but who you just were mentioning,
Pema Chodron.
What she says is absolutely 100% correct.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have to just shuck it all off and get rid of everything and to find what's really there. And if you do, you find it.
Yeah.
But it's a painful process. You got to go through it. Again, there's that struggle word that seems to be predominant in my life. Everything is a struggle. But if you do the struggle and you put in the time and you put in the work and you're able to gain that worth having, you must be prepared to lose everything.
Right. But the reward is worth it all.
There you have it. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with that. And it's that Bernadette Devlin quote that's a big, big quote in my life. So, yeah, I totally agree with it and understand it and have lived it.
I want to help promote whatever you're doing here, but my first question is, I had a lot of trouble finding your writings. You said on some other podcasts, how can people, are they online anywhere? Because
there's a reason for that.
Okay.
I never felt good enough to put things out there. Now, there was one story that I had sent to a friend of mine, and unbeknownst to me, she sent it to the editor of this book called A Guitar and a Pen.
Okay.
Now, a guitar and a pen, it's all real famous country songwriters. Chris Christopherson is in there.
Yeah.
Janice Ian is in there. Tom T. Hall is in there. All sorts of people. And I was playing with Brooks and Dunn. Now, I'm not a country songwriter, but because I play with Brooks and Dunn, they fudged me in because they liked my story so much. It's called Shiny Like New. Now, that's something I wrote 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But I just never have felt like I was good enough to get anything out there. So I've never sent anything in to be published yet.
So as of now, people can't find your writings online.
That's correct. No, that's correct. Now, I'm fixing to, on the DonnyWynn.com, which is where you heard the other stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see my photos there.
Right.
There's a spot, there's going to be some stories, and I'm about to put a few of them up.
Oh, good. Good. Okay.
So I'm going to get some of those out there. But yeah, I've written, like I said, I've written a novel. I've written another novel about my discovery of the photographs and how that all happened. And I'm writing this one now about every record. There's real specific memories and songs. And like Woke Up Laughing, it's a big story. But I'm in the middle of writing all those right now.
I can't wait for that to come out.
So that it's going to take a little while for me to get it together, but I'm going to get it out there, and we'll see. I'm just going to have to grow this up organically, and take on a career doing it, because now I've not made any music now in 3 years.
Yeah.
I go to Austin every now and then and work on other people's stuff. I still do sessions,
Right.
and I'm doing a thing with Pat Mastelotto,
Ooh.
drummer for King
Oh, I
Crimson.
know Pat. He was great. I love him on Oranges and Lemons with XTC too.
Brilliant work.
Yeah.
But he and I grew up together in Los
Really?
Angeles. Yeah.
I'm about to see him. He's going to play with Stickmen here.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, he and I toyed with the idea. We'd always talked about working together, and we did some stuff a couple years ago, double drum stuff.
Yeah.
And he had the idea. He goes, "Well, why don't you read one of your stories over this?"
Oh, cool.
And I did, and it really worked. Now we put it on hold because he had to rebuild this new studio. So it's a project that's been put on hold.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, we're going to get it revitalized and get it back. Because I've been writing for the last 2 years. I've been writing a lot every day. But that's what I'm doing now instead of making music. Is I'm working hard to get as good as I've wanted to be all my life as a writer. And thankfully, I can say in the last like 3-4 months, I've gotten there. I'm now satisfying myself. I'm my own worst critic, but I'm satisfying myself. I'm getting where I've wanted to be all this time. So that's what I want to do with the rest of my life, is to write.
That's
And I'll
wonderful.
still make music where I can. You
Yeah.
know, if people want to have me, like I'm playing now better than I've ever played in my life. So this is the time to get me. Um, but writing is that's where all my concentration is to that.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So if people want to check out your stuff, first of all, DonyWynn.com. And just in case people don't know, it's DonyWynn.com. And then I would say you're predominantly on Facebook, but you do have an Instagram called Dony Wynn Photo with an F, correct?
That's correct.
Any other thing that you would like to promote that you're doing that's coming up?
Nope. Nope. You pretty much have covered it. And by the way, thank you for your due diligence. You've had a number of really, really good questions, and you've done your homework, and I appreciate that very much. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. There's a lot that has gone on, and like I said, hopefully now that we'll start to put some of this out there, and it'll start to make sense to people. But
Yeah.
I've done this so people can enjoy it, and hopefully they'll be able to.
I can't wait for your books to come out, and I'm going to read all of them.
Well, at some point, I'll send you, if you can give me your email address, I'll
Yeah.
just send you little things here and there.
Oh, I'd love to read it. Yeah.
So that way you can kind of check it out and see what's going on.
Yeah, and I'd love it if you send me your postal address because I want to send you a book. I want to send you the book by Pima Chodron. I think you'd love that.
Wonderful. Yes, I would love that very much. A buddy of mine just turned me on to another new writer who I knew nothing about, Donald Ray Pollock. He's a Southern Gothic writer, and I mean
Wow.
dark
Like
and
an Anne
tough,
Rice type of thing?
way beyond that.
Oh, no.
Way beyond that. I
No,
mean,
I got to get it. I got to get it. Yeah.
dark. There's actually a film. They made a film on a book of his. It's on Netflix. It's called The Devil All the Time.
Ooh, that sounds familiar.
And the director did a beautiful job of it. I mean, beautiful job, because it could have been a real nasty, horrible, bloody, horrible thing, and the director handled it with class.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really well done, but brilliant writer. And I've kind of been going. I'm fighting blindness.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I have swelling of my cornea in my left eye. Luckily, I found these drops. It's kind of keeping it bay.
Yeah.
But I must admit, I really like audiobooks these days.
Same. Yeah.
Like on YouTube, there's all my favorite Bukowski books. They have found this guy, Charles Basquiat, who's an actor.
Yeah.
Who's got the perfect voice. Because Bukowski's voice was kind of whiny.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
It didn't really work for me. But this Basquiat, it's the voice that you wish he would have had. But he tells the stories, and he tells all the different accents, and it's really, really well done. So I do. I'm a new audio book kind of junkie. I love that.
Well, you must have seen the movie Barfly with Mickey Rourke playing him, right?
I did.
Yeah, and then Bukowski's got a little cameo there.
Absolutely, he does.
I live here, and I was in L.A., but I just moved to Palmdale. But when I first moved here 12 years ago,
Palmdale?
I'm in Palmdale. Absolutely love it. My wife and I bought a house out in the desert, and if you know, we live about 10 minutes away from where Captain Beefheart and Zappa grew up together.
I was fixing to say that's where they grew up.
Good juju out here.
Yeah, Captain Beefheart. That's one of my musical idols.
Oh man,
I mean everything
the
about
mascara
him.
snake, right? A tin teardrop.
Oh gosh, I first heard him on, of course, the Magic Band back in the '60s. I heard a song by him one time. It was like, I think it was "Do Why Diddy."
Oh, I love that.
But,
Safe as milk, right?
Yeah, the first time I heard him that I really went crazy over him was that live record he did with Zappa, Bongo Fury.
Yeah, I got that.
And the voices he did on that record were great. And then that band he put together in the '80s with Robert Williams and Jeff Morris Tepper and Drew Feldman.
Yep.
Man, that band, Jesus Christ, were they great? I mean, they were great.
Yeah.
They played a whole weekend at the Whiskey A Go Go, and I spent. I saw every show they did.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
It was a good one. But yeah, Palmdale. I'm very familiar with Palmdale, so I know what's going on. But yeah, I love what happened with him. You know, he obviously had some physical problems that he had to deal with.
Yeah.
But he transferred. He finally made music that I think really represented where he always wanted to be.
Yeah.
You know, which was that band in the early '80s. But then he transitioned into a painter. You know.
Yeah.
And I love that. And that's, again, this goes back to my time in exile where my main thing that I learned was diversify.
Yeah.
Because if certain people are drummers, certain people are guitar players, certain people are painters. I just happen to have a bunch of that shit that I'm interested in. And Robert pointed me in the right directions.
Yeah.
So I've got several things that I really enjoy doing. But yeah, that's why I'm transitioning into a writer right now. That's where I want to, because I've accomplished what I wanted to as a drummer.
Right.
Like I said, by 2015, I became the guy I always wanted to be.
Yep.
I accomplished what I wanted to with photography. In that process, I found. So I feel like I've conquered that one, but now I want to get writing done, and then I can leave and go wherever I'm going next and feel like I accomplished something while I've been here.
Wow. All right. Well, Dony Wynn, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to me. And I hope we can do this again someday because I have so many other questions for you.
Oh, well, good. Yeah. And hopefully there'll be more to talk about after I get some other things done. But again, thank you very much for taking the time and coming up with the questions that you did. I really appreciate that. Glad we did it.
All right. Have a wonderful day and thanks again.
Right back at you, laddie.